What would you do if you discovered your decade-long love was just a pig-fattening scheme? A calculated plot to bleed you dry, leaving you with no money, no home, and no chance of motherhood? I'm Emily Carter, and I survived that nightmare. While Michael was texting me, I'm at the hospital staying with my sick mom. I was looking right at him. He was barely 30 feet away, clinking glasses with his ex, celebrating the fact that he was about to snatch my house out from under me. But it gets sicker. His dying mother? She was the director of the whole play. And the absolute cruelty? He'd been secretly slipping me birth control for years, letting me drown in guilt and self-loathing because I thought I was infertile. All while they built a secret life using my blood, sweat, and tears. They thought I was naive prey with no legal safeguards. They were wrong. I'm a marketing strategist. And that night, when he whispered those horrific things into my hidden recorder by his table, he had no clue he was handing me a nuclear option. This isn't a victim's story. This is the perfect revenge plot of a woman with nothing left to lose. And I'm gonna show them. Pushing a professional into a corner is the most expensive mistake you'll ever make. Stick around until the end, because my countermove, it was orchestrated to perfection. Don't let the truth stay buried. Hit that subscribe button to stand with the good guys, and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Your support is the only reason I'm brave enough to expose this. Last Thursday started like any other day, hiding the disaster waiting in the wings. That morning, I got a missed call from a random number. When I called back, there was just a second of dead air before they hung up. I figured it was just spam, another annoyance in a hectic workday. I had no idea it was someone trying to save me from a lie while simultaneously shoving me into a truth far more terrifying. I'd just closed a massive marketing deal, and my top client insisted on dinner at this high-end French spot in downtown Chicago. Around 4 p.m., I shot a text to Michael. "Hey babe, I'll be late. Dinner with a client." He replied instantly. "Perfect. Mom's got a high fever. I gotta go take care of her. She's really weak, but don't worry, I got this. Love you." Michael always played the perfect son card, and since his mom lived 45 minutes out in the suburbs, I didn't think twice. Little did I know, he'd already called her to coach her. "If Emily calls, tell her I'm there making soup for you." When I heard she was sick, I actually felt guilty. "Should I cancel dinner and come help?" I asked. Michael manipulated me immediately. "No, babe, I'm already here. You go. This is a huge project, don't ruin the vibe. You need to bond with your colleagues for that promotion, right? I've got mom covered." His words sounded so logical, so sweet. Now I know it was just his way of gaslighting me to cover his tracks. Nothing felt off, no red flags. I actually felt a sense of relief that he had his own plans so I could focus on my partners without the girlfriend guilt. I got to the restaurant at 7:15. My client was running late. I tucked myself into a secluded corner, phone next to my water glass, scrolling through emails and rehearsing my pitch. Suddenly, a familiar voice ripped through the quiet atmosphere, coming from the most expensive booth in the place. A spot meant for high rollers, but occupied by the man supposed to be making soup for his mother. My heart literally stopped when I looked up. Michael was sitting there, right across from Sophia Vance, the ex-girlfriend he swore he'd cut off years ago. They were sharing a bottle of vintage red under a massive crystal chandelier. Michael poured the wine, then stroked her hair with a tenderness I hadn't felt in a decade. The way he looked at her made me want to throw up. I didn't storm over and make a scene. My marketing brain kicked in. Evidence is the ultimate weapon. I stayed in the shadows, filming their deep, lustful kiss on my phone. Then, I moved fast. I talked a waiter into letting me borrow an apron, pretended to clear a table right next to theirs, and slipped a voice recorder under the linen. What I heard next turned my pain into a cold, hard shockwave. Michael whispered, "Everything's on track. I took her to that fertility specialist last month and bribed him to tell her it's just stress. She's still taking those useless supplements and blaming herself every day. Meanwhile, I've been on the male pill since last year. It's perfect. She'll never push for kids and she'll always think she's the problem." Sophia giggled. "She's so gullible. Just keep pushing her to move the rest of her savings into the joint account. Then you're free to be with me." A chill ran down my spine, like 1,000 needles stabbing my skin at once. It wasn't just the money or the cheating. He was trying to rob me of my womanhood in the most sadistic way possible. That kind of shock is quiet. It's cold. It sinks into your marrow and makes every move you make feel heavy, mechanical, yet absolutely determined. A waiter came by and asked if I wanted sparkling or still. I think I nodded. He put a glass in front of me, though I don't remember looking at him. My hands were shaking so hard I had to press them flat against the table just to stay grounded. I don't know what kicked in, survival or just raw instinct, but I grabbed my phone. I wasn't just taking photos anymore. I switched to video, zooming in just enough to capture Michael and Sophia locked in a kiss. The recorder under their tablecloth was still drinking in every word of their disgusting confession about my bank account and those secret birth control pills. Once I knew I had the proof of the fraud and the medical abuse, I opened our text thread. I typed, "Hope dinner with mom is going great." Attached the photo, hit send, and then I took it a step further. I hit the FaceTime button for his mother. She picked up on the first ring, her face appearing on the screen with a fake, exhausted look. "Emily, honey? Michael's busy in the kitchen making me some soup. He's such a good son, don't you worry about a thing." I didn't say a word at first. I just took a slow, deep breath, keeping my voice sounding like the worried, clueless girlfriend. "Oh, Mom, I'm so stressed. Listen, I'm standing right in front of the best soup spot in the city. Should I have some chicken soup delivered for you and Michael?" I let the silence hang there, wanting it to feel suffocating for her. "What do you like, Mom? Should I add extra scallions or maybe some salted egg?" As she started stammering and tripping over her lies, I slowly panned my camera toward the center of the restaurant. My voice went from sweet to ice cold in a heartbeat. "Actually, never mind. It looks like Michael is already full." The frame caught Michael perfectly, clinking glasses with Sophia. "And you know what, Mom? His dinner date is Sophia, the same girl he swore to me was ancient history." Dead silence on the other end. Even through the tiny screen, I saw her face go ghost white. The blood just drained out of her. From across the room, I watched the exact second his phone buzzed in his pocket. Michael pulled away from Sophia, wearing this lazy, smug smirk, probably expecting some harmless text. Then his face hit the floor. He dropped his phone. It hit the table with a sharp clack that made Sophia jump back in shock. He looked up, his eyes darting around the room in these frantic, jerky movements, desperate to find a loophole, any lie to undo what I'd just nailed down with digital proof. Our eyes locked across the room. It wasn't anger. It wasn't even guilt. It was pure, unadulterated panic. The panic of a man who never thought Judgment Day would show up this clean, this sudden, and this undeniable. I didn't give him the satisfaction of another second. I stood up, slid a $20 bill under my untouched water glass, and walked out. No shouting, no dramatic confrontation. I wasn't going to give him anything he could twist later. Outside, the night air hit my face like a slap. But even then I felt disconnected, like I was watching myself walk from a mile away. I got to my car, climbed in, and locked the doors. Michael came sprinting out, pounding on the glass, screaming, "Emily, you've got it all wrong. Sophia is just an old friend. I was just there to give her some advice." I didn't hear him. I didn't even look. I just hit the gas, leaving his desperate lies to choke in my exhaust. I drove around the city for 2 hours, my headlights cutting through the dark. The phone next to me was a buzzing nightmare, calls, texts, voicemails. All Michael. I didn't open a single one. Around 10 p.m., I pulled into a hotel parking lot and booked a room. The bed was stiff, the pillows were flat. I only slept for maybe 2 hours, staring at the ceiling, waiting for reality to settle into something I could actually wrap my head around. But it never did. The next morning, I turned my phone back on. 42 missed calls, nearly 55 texts. Some of the highlights. "It's not what it looked like. Emily, please come home, we need to talk. You're overreacting. She's just a friend. I can explain everything. Where are you? I'm going crazy worrying about you. This happened because you're always so focused on work. We never spend any time together." And then the kicker, sharp as a knife. "Since you didn't want to get married anytime soon, I was just confused." That last text cut through the fog in my brain like a serrated blade. Less than 12 hours after being caught red-handed, Michael had already mastered the pivot. From "I'm sorry" to "it's your fault." It was so smooth, so practiced. I realized right then how many times I'd let him do this to me over the last 10 years. I didn't reply. Instead, I called the only person who had ever warned me about him, my sister, Olivia. Her voice cracked before I could even finish explaining. "Get over here," she said, her voice like iron. "You are not staying alone tonight." That was the moment I realized I'd been holding my breath for hours. I grabbed my bag, checked out, and drove straight to my sister's house without looking back once at the wreckage of my old life. Olivia opened the door. She didn't ask a single question. She just pulled me into one of those fierce, "I got you" sister hugs, the kind of firm, steady embrace only a sister can give. For the first time in days, my mind felt quiet, like a tiny boat finally hitting the dock after a massive storm. When she let go, she scanned my face, seeing every ounce of pain I was trying to hide. "You're staying here," she said shortly. "No arguments." Olivia's house always felt solid, the kind of place you go when you need to borrow some stability because yours is totally tapped out. I dropped my bag in the living room and sat on the edge of the bed, dazed. My phone buzzed again. Still Michael. I powered it down, letting the silence swallow his name. Olivia knocked and walked in with a mug of hot tea, the steam rising up like it was trying to soothe my shivering soul. She set the tea down next to me and sat on the edge of the bed. "Talk to me," she said. So I spilled everything. Every soul-crushing detail. The restaurant, Sophia, the kiss, the photos, the texts, and especially that recording of the scheme to seize my assets and the secret about the male birth control. I told her how Michael just disintegrated the second he realized I had him dead to rights. When I finished, Olivia didn't freak out. She didn't overreact. She just let out this long, heavy exhale, her fury burning quietly behind a calm exterior. "Emily," she said, her voice low and steady. "This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a moment of weakness. This was a calculated, cold-blooded operation." Her voice softened, but it still carried so much weight. "And you didn't deserve a single second of it." I couldn't find my voice if I tried, so I just nodded in silence. We sat there in that heavy, shared silence until the doorbell started screaming, a sharp, jarring sound that ripped through the peace. At that moment, I truly needed to know I wasn't alone. If you're here with me, please subscribe to the channel right now. Your presence at this moment means more than 10,000 words. I jumped. Olivia stood up instantly. "Stay here." But I followed her into the hallway anyway, even though she told me not to. My heart was thumping against my ribs. She cracked the front door open. Michael was standing there. His hair was a mess, his eyes were bloodshot, and his jaw was set in this fake, righteous anger to cover up his panic. "Is Emily here?" he demanded. "Depends," Olivia snapped, her voice like ice. "What for?" "I need to talk to her," he said, trying to crane his neck to see over her shoulder. "She's blowing this way out of proportion. It was just a dinner." Olivia didn't flinch. "You kissed another woman. You lied. You manipulated your own mother to cover for you. That wasn't just a dinner. That was a premeditated betrayal." "You're poisoning her brain," he roared. "You've never liked me." "Exactly," Olivia said dryly. "Now get lost." He tried to shoulder his way in. Olivia blocked him with her whole arm, didn't move an inch. "Emily," he screamed. "Please, just let me explain." I instinctively backed away into the shadows. Olivia's voice went sharp, but she stayed in total control. "She doesn't want to see you. Leave now, or I'm calling the cops to have you hauled away." Michael's eyes were darting everywhere. Desperation was leaking through the cracks of his crumbling confidence. He shook his head, muttered something under his breath, and stomped down the porch steps like a frustrated toddler. Olivia slammed the door and leaned against it for a second. "This is just the beginning," she whispered. "He's going to try to rewrite this story. Don't let him." The next morning, she was right. Michael's mom left 8 voicemails before lunch. I only listened to the last one because I wanted to know what script Michael had fed her. Her voice was cold, dripping with judgment. "Emily, you're being so childish. Michael told me everything. He just made a mistake. A wise woman knows how to keep her family together. She doesn't run away over a minor emotional slip-up. You need to grow up. Stop embarrassing yourself." I stared at the phone, unable to believe my ears. Something inside me tightened, then hardened, turning into something cold and solid as stone. Olivia walked in just as the message ended. "Give me that." She snatched the phone and killed the power again. "You don't need to poison yourself with that trash right now." I didn't argue. By Monday morning, I felt like I was floating in a thick fog, but I forced myself to take the next step. I walked into the office of a family law attorney, Laura Kane, a woman who radiated the kind of calm, lethal confidence I was starving for. I handed her everything: the photos, the texts, the timeline, and the recording from the restaurant. Laura reviewed the evidence with the cold, professional stare of a legal assassin. "This recording is priceless, Emily," she said, her eyes sharp. "It doesn't just prove the affair, it's undeniable evidence of fraudulent conspiracy to seize assets. And the fact that he manipulated your fertility? A judge is going to find his character absolutely repulsive." "However," Laura continued, her tone turning cautious, "the financial ties are going to be messy. Even though you bought the house before the relationship, the fact that you used a joint account for renovations gives him a hook to sue for compensation." She looked me dead in the eye. "We need to shield you immediately. A guy like this didn't just cheat, he's been running a financial long game on you." Those words hit me like a physical punch, a reality I didn't want to face but couldn't deny. When I got back to Olivia's, I opened my laptop and started digging into Sophia Vance. Not because I was jealous, but because I was in survival mode. I needed to know exactly who my enemy was. Everything on her social media was polished to a shine: group photos, company events, birthday parties. But then I froze when I hit an old album. My heart skipped a beat. Sophia wasn't single. She was married with 2 kids. Michael wasn't just betraying me, he was actively helping destroy another family. He was lurking in the background of so many of those photos, more than I could stomach. But the real gut punch was the family portraits. Sophia wasn't divorced or struggling. She had a husband, 2 kids, and a smiling home that was completely oblivious to the truth. I covered my mouth, realizing I wasn't the only one living in a universe that was about to collapse. Michael hadn't just cheated on me. He had willingly become a partner in someone else's betrayal, a happy accomplice to the demolition of a family. I sat there in silence for a long time. But instead of sending some weak, anonymous email, a cold, decisive fury rose up inside me. I decided to pick up the phone and call her husband Daniel directly. This didn't feel like revenge. It felt like a necessary alliance to protect the truth. "I'm Emily," I said firmly when he picked up, my voice like steel. "Your wife and my partner are planning to bankrupt both of us. I have all the evidence. Sunday night, 8:30, at the Lookout. Show up, and you'll see the truth. Don't, and you'll forever be the last man to know you're being played. Your choice." I hung up before he could even react. Sunday night, Daniel showed up. He didn't say a word. He just stood there recording everything with eyes like ice, a silence far more terrifying than any scream. When Sophia turned around and saw her husband, the color drained from her face. She frantically pushed Michael away like he was something filthy and started sobbing, begging for forgiveness. That was the moment Michael truly understood. He had lost all control. I closed my laptop. Olivia didn't ask what I'd done, but she looked at me for a long time. Her eyes were a mix of tenderness, pride, and a hint of heartache. I didn't feel proud of myself, but I didn't feel ashamed either. That night, lying in the guest bed and staring at the ceiling, I realized something chillingly quiet. This wasn't the end of anything. This was just the beginning. And the aftershocks hit faster than I expected. Only 2 days after the confrontation at the bar, I woke up to find Olivia standing by my bed, holding her phone like it was a piece of radioactive waste. "You need to see this," she said, her voice laced with anxiety. I sat up slowly, bracing myself. She turned the screen toward me. A mutual acquaintance had posted a cryptic status on social media. "Some people are willing to destroy their own families just because they think no one is watching. Remember, everything done in the dark will be brought to light." My heart hammered against my chest. Before I could even ask, Olivia's phone buzzed again. "Oh my God," she whispered, turning pale. "Emily, this is about Michael." 15 minutes later, I had the full story. Daniel had filed for divorce immediately. Sophia tried to deny everything at first, but then he found even more incriminating messages on her phone, including screenshots from a group chat I wasn't part of, thank God. There were messages from Michael and messages from Sophia. It wasn't just a simple affair. They had been plotting things that were truly sadistic. She mentioned that Michael promised to leave me. Michael told her he was already prepared to build a new life with her. The more details I heard, the colder my hands became. 8 months. For 8 months, those lies had been crawling through my daily life like invisible fingerprints. For 8 months, he had been secretly taking male birth control, so I'd blame myself for being infertile, all while he and his mistress quietly drafted a financial plan to dump me once I was broke. Daniel filed the papers within 48 hours. Michael, from what I heard later, went absolutely ballistic, but he wasn't angry at himself. He was angry at Sophia for letting it all fall apart, for not being better at hiding it, for not scrubbing the trail. He was furious that she had let them get caught red-handed. I sat at Olivia's kitchen table, clutching a mug of tea I couldn't bring myself to sip, listening to the avalanche of information pouring in from indirect sources. Every new detail felt like a shove, but I didn't fall. Maybe because I'd already hit rock bottom days ago, or maybe because a part of me had always known something was wrong, long before that night at the restaurant. Olivia touched my hand lightly, startling me. "You're handling this better than anyone could have expected," she said. "I don't feel okay. I feel like I'm balancing on a razor's edge, where every breath could make everything shatter all over again." Late that afternoon, my lawyer finally called. Laura spoke in her usual calm, professional tone. "We've requested Michael's phone records. There's a lot there, Emily." I closed my eyes. "How bad is it? You deserve to know the truth." I held my breath. "The messages between him and Sophia weren't just some sappy love affair," Laura continued, her voice unwavering. "They included financial discussions, explicit plans to dump you after he'd successfully maneuvered to seize certain assets. There are even texts where Sophia encourages him to pressure you into moving your savings into the joint account so they'd have seed money for their new start." The room blurred for a second. He had planned this, step by step. My voice caught in my throat. "Emily," Laura said softly, but with gravity. "He didn't cheat on an impulse. He cheated while building a strategy for fraud." I pressed my hand to my forehead. It felt like my brain was full of shattered glass, every shard a lie, a tiny calculated scheme. Laura went on gently, but every word felt like a blade. "There are threads where Sophia pushes him to make you contribute more to the joint funds. One text says exactly, once she moves the rest of her savings into the joint account, you'll be free to be with me." My breath hitched, freezing in my chest. She saw me as a glorified ATM for their happiness? I choked out, my voice raspy. "Essentially, yes," Laura confirmed coldly. "More than once." And Michael texted back, agreeing to it. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just felt a bit detached from reality. The way your body checks out when it decides it's had enough and switches to a quiet survival mode. I set the phone on the table, intending to power it down for some peace. But right before the screen went dark, a message from an unknown number popped up. No greeting. Just one sentence. "Sophia isn't the only one." Attached was a blurry image file. My heart tightened again. I stared at the screen, my fingers trembling as I opened the file. The image started to load, a shadowy figure, a face not yet clear. But before the image could fully render, I took a deep breath and flipped the phone face down on the table. The black screen reflected my face, not panicked, but fierce. I didn't need to know who it was. I only needed to know this. Michael was ready to destroy everything, and so was I. But with the truth, not lies. Justice requires a cold head, and tonight my silence was the loudest answer. Laura paused. "The recordings in these texts will be rock-solid evidence for the fraudulent conspiracy to seize assets. Charge we're taking to court." A small, bitter smile escaped my lips. "It's strange to hear the worst part of your life described as useful." I thanked her, hung up, and stared at the wall for nearly 2 minutes. 2 minutes of silence that felt like an eternity, before Olivia walked in looking worried. She sat next to me without asking anything. Just her presence kept the panic from swallowing me whole. Late that evening, the next wave hit. First, an email from my company's HR department. But this wasn't a standard inquiry. Michael had submitted a forged psychological report, accusing me of having a personality disorder and a tendency to fabricate stories. He had even contacted one of my company's competitors to leak internal data he'd secretly copied from my laptop, nearly costing me a major client. My stomach churned. A cold wave of nausea. He didn't just want me out of the house. He wanted to destroy my reputation and the career I had spent 10 years of my youth building. It took 3 days for HR to finish the investigation. 3 days of living with the feeling that Michael was trying to paint me as unstable, the crazy wife. But I didn't just sit there for interviews. As a marketing specialist, I knew the best way to kill a PR crisis was with cold, hard facts. I gathered proof that Michael used funds from the joint account to pay for these smear services, from wire receipts and emails with a dirty PR firm to the search history for reputation sabotage services on our shared computer. I compiled it all into a detailed report with a clear timeline, then sent a professional analysis with full documentation to all of his key partners. "You want to play the reputation game? I'm the expert," I whispered to myself, a new kind of coldness forming in my heart. When HR concluded that his complaints were completely baseless, I felt a flicker of relief. But it only lasted for a second. Because that very evening, a police officer knocked on Olivia's door. Michael was claiming that I had been stalking, harassing, and following him. I felt something inside me break, slowly and painfully. My final shred of patience, perhaps. "I've been right here," I told the officer, my voice low but steady. "I've already blocked his number." I handed over my device. The officer checked it and nodded with a sympathetic look. "His story doesn't line up. This is clearly a false report." I collapsed onto the sofa, exhausted. Olivia knelt beside me. "He's losing it," she whispered. "That's what people like him do when they lose control of the script they wrote." I believed her. But it didn't stop the creeping dread of the Psycho Emily version he was trying to manufacture in everyone else's eyes. By the 3rd week, Michael hired a new lawyer, a real aggressive pit bull type. Suddenly, I was served with court papers demanding that I provide him with financial support, using the ridiculous argument that he had sacrificed his career opportunities for me. In reality, Michael earned significantly more than I did. It would have been a joke if it weren't actually happening, written in cold legal jargon that could cause real damage. His family started jumping in too. His mother called my mother, calling me childish and demanding that I be forgiving to keep the family together. My mother called me immediately after, her voice fuming through the phone. "It's a good thing they aren't close by, or I'd show them exactly what I think. Don't listen to a word they say, honey." But the only call that truly bothered me, that left me aching, came from Michael's father, a man I had always deeply respected. "Emily," he said softly, his voice heavy with exhaustion, "I don't want to take sides. I just want to understand what's going on. Michael says you've misunderstood everything." I took a deep breath. No defensiveness, no agitation. I just calmly told him the whole truth. The restaurant, the phone records, the financial schemes, the secret birth control, and his threats to use fake evidence to destroy me. There was a long, agonizing silence on the other end, weighted with disappointment. Finally, he sighed. A sound of pure pain. I don't even recognize my own son anymore. When I hung up, I sat in silence for a long time, letting the weight of that sentence, the heartbreaking admission of a father, sink into my mind. Late that night, a voicemail appeared, and it made the final piece of who Michael really was fall into place. His voice was slurred from drinking, filled with rage and a total loss of control. "You think you won, Emily? You think you're so smart? You have no idea what I'm holding over you. You're going to regret this. I have proof. Things you did. Think long and hard about it." I listened to it twice. I knew for a fact I hadn't done anything for him to have proof of. It was just an empty threat. But that message showed me one thing clearly. He was desperate. And desperate people no longer care about the consequences. That was the moment I realized that just playing defense wasn't enough. I needed to proactively protect myself and prepare for whatever was coming next. The Chicago courthouse smelled of cold air and old paper. A sterile space where lives were dismantled by lines and stamped signatures. As Olivia and I walked in for the first hearing, I felt like I was stepping into someone else's story. The story of someone braver and more resolute that I was being forced to become. I kept waiting for my hands to stop shaking, but they never did. Olivia just held my hand tight, feeding me her strength. Laura Kane met us in the hallway, as steady as a rock wall. Today is mostly procedural, she said, but Michael's lawyer might try some dramatic stunts. Don't react. Let me handle it. The courtroom doors opened, and Michael was right there. He looked worse than I'd ever seen him. Deep dark circles under his eyes like bruises, disheveled hair, his jaw clenched in a way that showed sleepless nights and the panic eating him from the inside. But as soon as his eyes found mine, something else flickered. Not guilt, but total resentment. He hated that I was standing tall. He hated that Olivia was by my side. He hated that I hadn't crumbled the way he so cowardly expected. His lawyer, a burly man with the overconfidence of a stage actor, whispered something to him and smirked, throwing a defiant glance my way. We settled into our seats. The judge entered, quick and expressionless. Michael's side presented first. His lawyer stood up and launched into a dramatic speech about emotional neglect, the breakdown of a relationship, and a man pushed to the edge after years of cold treatment. He cited text fragments from old arguments, minor daily disagreements, and twisted them into a fake narrative that I was cold, disconnected, and emotionally stunted. He waved printed screenshots around like they were smoking guns. "Your Honor," he said, his voice booming with confidence. "This is repetitive evidence showing that Miss Carter refused to resolve conflicts. My client frequently sought connection, comfort, and even clarity. Instead, all he received was rejection." The judge examined a page he handed over. One message read, "I'm exhausted. Can we talk later?" Another said, "In a meeting, not right now." The judge lowered her glasses and looked straight at Michael's lawyer, looking completely unimpressed. "This is normal communication between adults," she said flatly, her voice cutting through the air like a blade. "There is no abuse here. Move on." Michael's lawyer froze for a second, visibly flustered, then tried to continue. "Furthermore, Miss Carter also." But he never got the chance to finish the sentence. Laura stood up. "Your Honor," her voice rang out clearly, slicing through the stifling atmosphere. "We have far more relevant evidence." She handed a thick envelope to the court clerk. "May I?" the judge asked. Laura nodded, her gaze cold. "These are messages between the defendant, Mr. Reynolds, and Miss Sophia Vance, spanning nearly 8 months, she declared. They include not only discussions of the affair and intent to defraud, but a deliberate financial plan aimed at disadvantaging my client." She paused for a second, letting the weight of her next words hit with maximum impact. "Most notably, this file contains undeniable evidence that Mr. Reynolds secretly used male birth control to manipulate Miss Carter's reproductive rights." The entire courtroom seemed to stop breathing. The judge opened the file and began to read in a heavy, solemn silence. The room was so quiet I could hear a clock ticking in some distant corner. Then the judge's eyebrows shot up, a deep crease appearing between her brows, a look of cold fury as she reached the part where Michael confessed to seizing the savings. And then, a twist no one saw coming. Michael's mother walked up to the witness stand. My heart nearly stopped. She wasn't there to defend her son. She stood there, gripping the edge of the wooden stand so hard her knuckles turned white, her voice trembling but resolute. "I have to tell the truth. I was wrong to help my son lie." She looked up at me, her eyes red and filled with tears, her genuine remorse on full display. "Emily, I'm so sorry. I can't live with this guilty conscience anymore." My throat went tight. I never expected justice, or rather a conscience, to come from the very person I thought would forever stand by the betrayer. "Your Honor," she continued, her voice steadier though still shaking, "I confirm every lie he forced me to tell. Here is the recording of him telling me how to act when Emily called." She held out an old phone with a shaking hand, as if handing over a burden that had crushed her for too long. The courtroom fell into a deathly silence. The only sounds were her heavy, gasping breaths and Michael sobbing breathlessly like a child stripped of every cover. Michael collapsed in his seat, his head buried in his hands, his shoulders shaking. The judge slammed the file shut, looking at Michael with undisguised contempt. "This is not merely an affair. This is evidence of calculated exploitation and systematic deception." A mournful silence filled the room again. The judge flipped through the pages slowly. She let out a sharp exhale. One of Michael's messages appeared. "She's so naive. Once everything is moved to the joint account, we'll be fine." Another from Sophia. She won't suspect a thing. Keep pushing for the renovations. Most notably, the judge lingered for a long time on the recording and the texts where Michael admitted to secretly taking male birth control. She looked up, her gaze full of disgust as she stared directly at Michael, as if looking at something rotten. "Mr. Reynolds," she said slowly, every word heavy as lead. "These messages are extremely disturbing. Your manipulation of Miss Carter's psychology and reproductive rights is a sadistic act that goes far beyond the boundaries of a common affair." Michael fidgeted in his chair, his face pale. His lawyer tried to speak, but she raised her hand for silence, a sharp, uncompromising gesture. "This is not merely an affair," the judge continued, her voice ringing out coldly. "This is evidence of a premeditated plan for financial exploitation and systematic deception." The word exploitation echoed in my head like a punch to the heart. Michael looked at me, his eyes wide as if I were the one who had betrayed him. His lawyer stammered, "Your Honor, these messages were taken out of—" "They were taken directly from the court-ordered extraction of his devices," the judge interrupted sharply, not giving him a chance to breathe. "They are valid and credible evidence. Continue." Michael's entire strategy crumbled in a single afternoon. The judge denied his request for temporary financial support. I felt a rush of fresh, cool air fill my lungs for the first time after weeks of suffocating. As we left the courtroom, Michael rushed after us, his voice raspy. "Emily, wait." Olivia stepped between us, but I signaled that it was okay. Michael looked at me like a drowning man who had just realized the water wouldn't hold him up anymore. "I never wanted it to go this far," he said, his voice dripping with resentment. "You made everything worse by dragging this all into court." I stared at him, my gaze flat, devoid of even a flicker of emotion. "You created every single thing that led to this day." His jaw twitched. I was confused back then. Sophia told me so many things. She said you'd never fight for me. A sad smile, light as smoke, touched my lips. She was wrong. I fought for us for years. You just didn't realize it until I stopped. He looked away, unable to face me. I stood there in the silence, waiting, one last moment of stupidity, hoping to see a spark of genuine remorse. But when Michael finally met my eyes, all I saw was that same cowardly survival instinct, the bitter anger of getting caught. "Are you really gonna let them paint me as some kind of monster?" "They aren't painting anything," I replied, my voice calm to the point of being cold. "You wrote the story of your life yourself." His lips tightened, twisting into a grimace. "One day, you're going to realize you blew this whole thing out of proportion." Olivia stepped forward, her voice heavy and cold like chilled steel. "One day you'll realize she didn't." Michael's lawyer froze for a second, visibly flustered, then tried to continue. "Furthermore, Miss Carter also." But he never got the chance to finish the sentence. Laura stood up. "Your Honor," her voice rang out clearly, slicing through the stifling atmosphere. "We have far more relevant evidence." She handed a thick envelope to the court clerk. "May I?" the judge asked. Laura nodded, her gaze cold. "These are messages between the defendant, Mr. Reynolds, and Miss Sophia Vance, spanning nearly 8 months, she declared. They include not only discussions of the affair and intent to defraud, but a deliberate financial plan aimed at disadvantaging my client." She paused for a second, letting the weight of her next words hit with maximum impact. "Most notably, this file contains undeniable evidence that Mr. Reynolds secretly used male birth control to manipulate Miss Carter's reproductive rights." The entire courtroom seemed to stop breathing. The judge opened the file and began to read in a heavy, solemn silence. The room was so quiet I could hear a clock ticking in some distant corner. Then the judge's eyebrows shot up, a deep crease appearing between her brows, a look of cold fury as she reached the part where Michael confessed to seizing the savings. And then, a twist no one saw coming. Michael's mother walked up to the witness stand. My heart nearly stopped. She wasn't there to defend her son. She stood there, gripping the edge of the wooden stand so hard her knuckles turned white, her voice trembling but resolute. "I have to tell the truth. I was wrong to help my son lie." She looked up at me, her eyes red and filled with tears, her genuine remorse on full display. "Emily, I'm so sorry. I can't live with this guilty conscience anymore." My throat went tight. I never expected justice, or rather, a conscience, to come from the very person I thought would forever stand by the betrayer. "Your Honor," she continued, her voice steadier though still shaking. "I confirm every lie he forced me to tell. Here is the recording of him telling me how to act when Emily called." She held out an old phone with a shaking hand, as if handing over a burden that had crushed her for too long. The courtroom fell into a deathly silence. The only sounds were her heavy, gasping breaths and Michael sobbing breathlessly like a child stripped of every cover. Michael collapsed in his seat, his head buried in his hands, his shoulders shaking. The judge slammed the file shut, looking at Michael with undisguised contempt. "This is not merely an affair. This is evidence of calculated exploitation and systematic deception." A mournful silence filled the room again. The judge flipped through the pages slowly. She let out a sharp exhale. One of Michael's messages appeared. "She's so naive. Once everything is moved to the joint account, we'll be fine." Another from Sophia. "She won't suspect a thing. Keep pushing for the renovations." Most notably, the judge lingered for a long time on the recording and the texts where Michael admitted to secretly taking male birth control. She looked up, her gaze full of disgust as she stared directly at Michael, as if looking at something rotten. "Mr. Reynolds," she said slowly, every word heavy as lead. "These messages are extremely disturbing. Your manipulation of Miss Carter's psychology and reproductive rights is a sadistic act that goes far beyond the boundaries of a common affair." Michael fidgeted in his chair, his face pale. His lawyer tried to speak, but she raised her hand for silence, a sharp, uncompromising gesture. "This is not merely an affair," the judge continued, her voice ringing out coldly. "This is evidence of a premeditated plan for financial exploitation and systematic deception." The word exploitation echoed in my head like a punch to the heart. Michael looked at me, his eyes wide as if I were the one who had betrayed him. His lawyer stammered, "Your Honor, these messages were taken out of..." "They were taken directly from the court-ordered extraction of his devices," the judge interrupted sharply, not giving him a chance to breathe. "They are valid and credible evidence. Continue." Michael's entire strategy crumbled in a single afternoon. The judge denied his request for temporary financial support. I felt a rush of fresh, cool air fill my lungs for the first time after weeks of suffocating. As we left the courtroom, Michael rushed after us, his voice raspy. "Emily, wait." Olivia stepped between us, but I signaled that it was okay. Michael looked at me like a drowning man who had just realized the water wouldn't hold him up anymore. "I never wanted it to go this far," he said, his voice dripping with resentment. "You made everything worse by dragging this all into court." I stared at him, my gaze flat, devoid of even a flicker of emotion. "You created every single thing that led to this day." His jaw twitched. I was confused back then. Sophia told me so many things. She said you'd never fight for me. A sad smile, light as smoke, touched my lips. She was wrong. I fought for us for years. You just didn't realize it until I stopped. He looked away, unable to face me. I stood there in the silence, waiting. One last moment of stupidity, hoping to see a spark of genuine remorse. But when Michael finally met my eyes, all I saw was that same cowardly survival instinct, the bitter anger of getting caught. "Are you really gonna let them paint me as some kind of monster?" "They aren't painting anything," I replied, my voice calm to the point of being cold. "You wrote the story of your life yourself." His lips tightened, twisting into a grimace. "One day, you're going to realize you blew this whole thing out of proportion." Olivia stepped forward, her voice heavy and cold like chilled steel. "One day you'll realize she didn't." We turned our backs and walked away. Outside the courthouse, the Chicago sun hit my face, startlingly warm and bright. Freedom and grief are twins. They arrive at the same time, and at first, you can't tell them apart. Michael's lawyer tried one last, desperate stunt, filing a motion accusing me of hiding assets. The financial audit took 3 weeks. They tore everything apart, but they found nothing but honesty. Meanwhile, the messages between Michael and Sophia remained pinned to the records. They weren't just damaging, they were a demolition crew, leveling everything he tried to build. In a subsequent hearing, the judge spoke directly to Michael's face, her voice laced with warning. "I am deeply, deeply concerned by your conduct." The courtroom went dead silent. Even Michael's lawyer lowered his head, speechless. Outside, I heard someone call my name cautiously. It was Michael's father. His face was heavy with a profound disappointment for the son he no longer recognized. I'm sorry, he said, his voice raspy, for everything he did, for everything you're going through. My throat went tight, a complex wave of emotion rising up. You don't owe me an apology. He shook his head gently, his eyes tired. Maybe not, but you deserved better. I hope you know that now. As he walked away, his posture slightly slumped. I realized his quiet sincerity hurt more than Michael's cruelty ever did. At least, in these ashes, there was still a bit of humanity, a flicker of conscience, left from his family. Something worth holding on to in my memory. The truth had been peeled back layer by layer, like an onion that makes your eyes sting. And at the very bottom, what was revealed wasn't a void, but a sense of peace beginning to form. Fragile and small like a new sprout, but real. Very real. The case was nearing its end. But the story between Michael and me, its final unraveling, was about to enter its last painful chapter. On the morning of the final court date, I woke up before my alarm even went off. The sky outside Olivia's living room window was still pitch black, a deep navy blue that felt like a sacred pause, the quiet space between an ending and a beginning. I lay there for a long time, listening to the soft hum of the house, the heater, Olivia moving quietly in the next room, stable, peaceful, safe, all the things my life had been missing for far too long. As I got up and dressed, I thought I'd feel fear, one last tremor, but I didn't. There was only a strange, heavy stillness draped over me, a clear realization that no matter what happened in the next few hours, a door inside me had already been locked forever. The courthouse felt colder this time, or maybe I was just more aware of its sterile chill. Michael was already there when I arrived with Laura. At first, he wouldn't even look at me. He just stared at the polished floor. His shoulders slumped, his face gaunt like a ghost of his former self. Whatever illusion of control he'd been clinging to had crumbled into ash weeks ago. When the judge entered, everyone stood, and we began. Michael's lawyer launched one last, desperate attempt to warp reality. He dragged out those old screenshots of our arguments again, insisting they proved emotional abuse. He accused me of denying Michael attention, support, and communication. The judge didn't even bother hiding her irritation. She looked at the lawyer like he was an annoying fly. "These are standard disagreements between grown adults," she said, her voice sharp as a razor. "They do not constitute abuse. Do not waste any more of this court's time. Move on." His lawyer immediately pivoted to accusing me of hiding assets. His final desperate card. Laura stood up to counter instantly, reminding the court that a comprehensive financial audit had already been completed and had turned up absolutely nothing suspicious. The judge nodded, her expression final. "I see no evidence of financial concealment. Continue." Finally, Laura stood. She stepped forward and handed the judge a small file that was heavy with the weight of the truth. "Your Honor, this is the complete evidence of how the defendant, Mr. Reynolds, and Miss Sophia Vance conspired to financially exploit my client." Her voice was clear and unwavering. Specifically, this file contains medical records and confirmed messages showing that Mr. Reynolds secretly used male birth control to manipulate Miss Carter's reproductive rights, leading her to believe she was infertile, all to trap her and systematically profit from her finances. The judge opened the file and turned the pages, one by one. The silence in the room became thick and suffocating, like the air right before a storm. Michael stared at the table, his jaw clenched so tight I could practically hear it grind. His lawyer sat stiffly, hands clasped over his chest, knowing exactly what was about to hit them. After several minutes that felt like an eternity, the judge looked up. Her eyes were like two hammer strikes. "Mr. Reynolds," she said, her voice slow but carrying the full weight of a sentence. "Your systematic deception and manipulation of human rights throughout this relationship are deeply alarming. These messages show a clear intent to cause financial harm to Miss Carter. This court does not take that lightly." Michael swallowed hard, his throat bobbing. The judge continued, not giving him a chance to breathe. "Based on the evidence, the court rules, the house is the sole property of Ms. Emily Carter. Mr. Reynolds will receive only a limited compensation for his documented contributions to the backyard renovations." A murmur rippled through the courtroom. $12,000. That was it. The house Michael had plotted to seize for 10 years had just vanished into thin air right in front of him. My lungs finally expanded. A rush of fresh, free air flooded my chest. The pressure that had been crushing me for so long began to dissolve, replaced by an overwhelming sense of relief. The judge flipped to the next page, her voice remaining cold and decisive. Regarding the financial accounts, Miss Carter will retain all of her personal assets. Joint accounts will be split exactly according to documented contribution ratios. Mr. Reynolds' request for long-term spousal support is completely denied. Michael's lawyer jumped up to object, but the judge shut him down with a sharp, authoritative wave of her hand. The court awards a rehabilitative support payment to Mr. Reynolds for a period of 18 months, based on the prior domestic partnership at a rate of $1,100 per month. That number was a fraction of what he had been frantically demanding. In every sense, it was the law's final act of leniency, a cold, calculated form of pity. The judge closed the file with a sharp click. Case dismissed. The gavel hit the wood, a clean, final sound, like a knife cutting the last toxic threads between us. Everyone stood up. Michael stood too, but he didn't move. He was frozen. He just stood there, staring at the empty judge's bench long after she had walked away, as if hoping some miracle would reverse reality if he just waited long enough. I packed my things. My fingers didn't shake. My heartbeat was strangely steady for the first time after months of constant storms. As I walked into the long, cold marble hallway, he followed behind me like a shadow. "Emily," he called out, his voice raspy and broken. I stopped. Olivia wasn't by my side this time. Laura had already stepped into another meeting room. It was just the two of us in a hallway filled with heavy silence. He took a step closer, just near enough to hear each other's desperate breaths. All of this, was it worth it? His voice choked. Destroying everything like this? I looked at him. I actually looked at him for the first time since that fateful night at the French restaurant. His eyes were exhausted, sunken. He looked defeated, haggard, and there wasn't a single spark of remorse in him. Only the stupid anger of having lost, and a deep sorrow for himself. I answered softly, but every word was heavy as stone. "You were the one who destroyed it. I just stopped using my whole youth to glue the pieces back together." He flinched as if he'd been slapped, but only for a second. The self-pity surged back up. "You didn't have to drag us to court," he said, his voice dropping into a bartering tone. "We could have settled this privately. Now my reputation is gone. That stuff about the pills, did you really want to ruin me that badly?" He looked at me, his eyes wide with a sense of victimhood. "You've made me look like a monster." "You made yourself that way," I shot back, my voice steady, without a single ripple of emotion. All I did was bring the truth into a room where it no longer had a place to hide. If you see a monster in the mirror, is that the fault of the mirror, or the person standing in front of it? He stepped closer, lowering his voice into a whisper filled with fake secrecy. I was confused back then. Sophia told me so many things. She said you'd never fight for me. A sad smile, light as smoke, touched my lips. A smile for my own dead innocence. She was wrong. I fought for us for years. You just didn't realize it until I stopped. He let out a shaky exhale, as if he were about to cry. But his tears were nothing more than tools now. "She left me, you know?" He choked out, looking utterly betrayed. "As soon as Daniel got the evidence from you and filed for divorce, she said she couldn't handle the chaos. She blamed everything on me just to keep whatever assets she had left." His voice trailed off, withered by failure. "I've lost everything." I didn't answer. My silence was the cliff that his wailing crashed against, and shattered. He looked at me, his eyes searching for pity, for forgiveness, for a familiar softness, anything to grab onto and climb out. I gave him nothing. Only a cold, calm void. "I hope you're happy," he whispered, the bitterness souring every syllable, turning a wish into a curse. "You ruined my life." I held my gaze, calm and steady as tempered steel. "You ruined your own life," I said softly, but every word was like a nail pinning down the truth. "From the very second you secretly swapped those pills and planned to seize this house. I didn't ruin your life, I just refused to let you ruin the rest of mine." His face went blank, empty, as if those words had just struck a deep place he had never dared to look into. The truth, finally, had found its way in. Then I turned and walked away. I left his lonely, pathetic figure behind in the middle of that cold marble hallway. Outside the courthouse, the Chicago air hit my face. Warm, bright, and overwhelming, as if the entire past week had been compressed into a single ray of sunshine. I stood on the steps for a moment, closing my eyes, letting the light fill the dark corners of my soul that had been frozen for too long. That afternoon, I returned to my house for the first time in months. It was now completely mine, free from the shadow or power of the deceiver. I unlocked the door. The sound of the lock turning was sharp and final. Stepping inside, a short, sharp pang pierced my chest, the pain of lost familiarity, of fake memories. The rooms looked the same, but the feeling was entirely different. The walls were still stained with memories of him. The shadows still carried fragments of the life I had once naively called us. So I began to change it. I repainted the bedroom a soft, cool blue-gray, the color of dawn and stillness, replacing the cold, dead gray he had chosen. I moved the furniture, breaking the old arrangement. I threw open the windows that had been closed for too long, letting the light and fresh air rush in to banish the musty smell of lies. Every change, every brushstroke, every adjustment was a silent journey to reclaim myself, to erase his traces and imprint my own on every corner of the house. Days passed, then weeks. Sometimes, healing doesn't come from grand gestures. It exists in the small, simple moments. A quiet cup of coffee in the morning, without haste, without anxiety. The first night I slept through without waking up, without nightmares, just a deep, dark, peaceful sleep. The moment I realized I was no longer subconsciously checking my phone, no longer expecting an apology text or a new lie from him. One evening, an unknown number messaged, "I hope you're satisfied with having destroyed my life." I stared at those words for a moment. I knew it was him, gnawing on his failure in some cheap rental with his meager support payments, trying to drag me back into his emotional swamp. I didn't reply. I didn't analyze it. I just quietly blocked the number. Peace isn't something dramatic or loud. It comes softly, step by step, when you finally stop opening the door for those who only know how to live in and create chaos. 1 month later, while cleaning out old photos, I found it, the photo from the restaurant on that fateful night. I looked at it for a long time, not with the piercing pain of that day, not with the fire of rage that had once consumed me, but with a cold, quiet clarity. I realized that brutal moment, along with the calls to Daniel and his mother, hadn't ruined my life. It had saved me. It saved me from living another 10 years inside a lie decorated with love. It saved me from a future where I was stripped of my right to be a mother, my right to trust, and my right to value myself. I didn't delete the photo. I printed it out, tucked it in with the thick stack of case files and the final court judgment, and placed it all into an old wooden box, gently, like a coffin for the past. On a light, foggy morning, I carried the box to the shores of Lake Michigan, the place where I used to walk alone during my darkest days, where the wind and water had listened to my every silent sob. I didn't throw it into the water. That would still be an act of violence, a reaction. I simply placed it gently on an empty bench under a canopy of green trees, like leaving something behind that was allowed to stay there. Then I walked away slowly, without looking back. I didn't erase the past. I just learned how to stop carrying it in the suitcase of my present. True strength doesn't lie in revenge, but in the courage to leave the burden behind and walk away with empty, free hands. 1 year later, I stood backstage at an international marketing conference in New York, straightening my vibrant red blazer, the color of blood, of fire, of life, and of ultimate power. The color Michael once claimed was too loud, not a good fit for you. Now, under the warm gold of the backstage lights, I saw it as perfect. It was my color. And now, please welcome one of the sharpest minds in our industry, a leading expert in crisis marketing strategy, Emily Carter. My name rang out. The applause hit like a crashing wave. I took a deep breath and stepped out under the brilliant stage lights, facing thousands of attentive eyes with a confidence that was unprecedented, uncompromising, and entirely mine. On my ring finger, the mark of that fake engagement ring had vanished. The skin there had healed, smooth and flat, as if that ring had never existed. As if those 10 years were just a long dream. Instead, the stage lights sparkled off the new Cartier watch on my wrist, a gift I bought for myself. Its weight was perfect, balanced, unlike the heavy ring of bondage and lies. Every steady tick-tock reminded me, this is my time. A watch I bought with the commission from the very project Michael had once tried to steal. I held the slide remote and looked directly into the camera lens, live streaming to the entire world and into the eyes of whoever was watching. Into Michael's eyes, perhaps, sitting in some cheap rental, watching his cheap watch count the seconds until his next court date, or toward a hollow future. He once said I was a part of his plan, but he forgot the most fundamental thing. I am the one who writes the rules of the game. Below me, hundreds of faces are turned toward me, not toward the betrayed, broken woman from years ago, but toward the woman who stood up, who built herself back up, and who saved herself. I didn't lose 10 years. I used those 10 years as tuition, expensive and painful, to buy back a version of myself that is stronger, sharper, and more resilient. A person that no liar, no matter how sophisticated, could ever deceive again. Peace doesn't come from begrudgingly forgiving a betrayer. It comes from clear-headedly staring at the most brutal truth, bravely facing it with all your weakness and strength, and having the wisdom to walk away without carrying the burden of the one who tried to destroy you. And I made my choice. Have you ever looked into the eyes of someone you loved for a decade and realized the only thing that truly existed between you was a meticulously staged plan for deception? I have. And today, when I look in the mirror, I no longer see that naive, blindly trusting shadow of years past. I see a survivor, a warrior who has won her own battle, and most importantly, I see myself, whole, authentic, and absolutely free. No longer a pawn, no longer a supporting character in someone else's plan. I am the greatest and the only architect of my own life. My story doesn't end in tears. It ends with a steady step out into the light. I have found myself again. A version that is powerful, free, and no longer afraid. But I'm curious to know, after everything, what do you think about this ending? Please leave a comment with just one word. If you believe Michael and Sophia absolutely deserved what they got, that no punishment is too harsh for such a premeditated crime? Right, deserved. Or, if you think making him lose everything, having his family turn their backs on him, and ruining his reputation was too severe a punishment, right, excessive. Give a heart to any comments you agree with. I will read them all and pick out the most insightful perspectives. And if my journey meant something to you, please subscribe to the channel so we can walk together through the next stories of strength and self-mastery. From the bottom of my heart, thank you for listening.